Hello there, Bethyl enthusiasts. I'm here to answer more of your questions. Let's just dive right in. Sometimes I hope we're wrong and Beth never comes back so we can be TD forever. I want it to be 20 years after TWD is over and we're still adamant that she's out there somewhere. I want to be on my deathbed telling my grandkids about the theories that they have to carry on my legacy. But at the same time, TD would definitely go next level if Beth does return. I think that's sweet. I mean, don't get me wrong. Obviously, I hope she's going to return and we're going to see her in Daryl Dixon season 2. But I think it's sweet that you love the hope and that we all band together for something we know and believe and are looking forward to. It really does feel almost like, I don't know, I don't want to say a religion because I don't want it to have a negative connotation. Like, I don't mean it negatively at all. We're just a bunch of people who genuinely believe something and we look for the signs of it. And I think it's a really good thing and a real hopeful thing. And we tend to have a lot of camaraderie among us because of it. And I understand what you're saying. Like, I pick up on that too. I think it's something that's special. But keep in mind that even when she comes back, we can still tell our grandkids the stories about how most of the world thought we were crazy. And after 10 years, we still believed and we still hoped. And as I said in the last video, a couple videos ago, there were people who predicted it before it happened and knew it was going to happen. So there were people who knew all along. And no, it wasn't because we were in on it or, part of the, working for the studio or the production or anything. It's just because we understood how to read the signs and we had the faith. We had Beth's faith and we just believed it. I think it's still, even, whether she comes back or not, and I 1000% think she will be back in this season. I think it'll be season 2 and 3 of Daryl Dixon where we'll finally get her story and everything. But either way, it's still something that's really special, and I think it was meant to be, and a lot of us were meant to find each other, and that doing this as a hobby and hanging on to the show has gotten through a lot of us through some difficult times. And yeah, I just think it's 100% meant to be. So I do understand the sentiment there, even though I 100% want her to come back and everything. So thank you so much for sending that in. That's very sweet. Unrelated to TD or Beth, but I feel this is an interesting discussion, at least fandom-wise. TWD Socials just asked the question, Neggie, meaning Negan and Maggie, obviously, but holy moly, the comments are tearing them apart. The powers that be, that doesn't shock me at all. There are a lot of local fans saying they would hate seeing the two of them together, and some of them say they'll literally stop watching the show. Are they simply trying to stir up drama, get some fans engaging, or are there other motives? Possibly priming the audience with the idea. Look, I know a lot of people might hate this idea because Glenn, but from a story standpoint, I kind of love it. If it's done right, enemies to lovers is one of the best tropes in romance. I'm all for it. I think they need to shake up those two characters. You can only tell the same story, the hate between them, so many times before it gets completely played out. Think of how complex that would be, all their feelings of guilt and passion getting mixed together. That's great TV if you ask me, and would probably be fun for the writers and actors. Also, I'm trying to remember if the powers that be have ever done something like this before, stoke the fires of the shipping wars, because clearly there are some people who ship Neggie, myself included, so they don't know if they post something like this, it gets people talking. Yeah, back up to the questions kind of in the middle. Are they simply trying to stir up drama and get the fans engaging? Yes, I 100% think that's what it is. I'm actually, I'm really curious to see what they'll do with Maggie and Negan and Dead City. I feel like there's definitely a plan there, but I don't know what it's going toward. I personally do not think that they're going to go the romantic way. Not only because of Glenn, first of all, you got to understand that it's one thing when you have Daryl and Carol versus Daryl and Beth. They're going to go whatever way they're going to go with it. And it's simply that, obviously he's not going to have a romantic relationship with every woman on the show. So they pick one and that's what they head toward. And, as we've talked about a million times, I think they did that back at the beginning of season 3 when Daryl and Carol were up on the bus. That was them crossing out for good the idea of Daryl and Carol being romantic together, and then because she laughed and it became kind of a joke between them, and then right after that, we're talking seconds after that, he's staring at Beth while she's singing by the fire. To me, that was a very clear choice. We're not going with Daryl and Carol, we're going with Daryl and Beth. And since then, despite what the shippers may say and despite how they interpret things, what they're showing us in the show has never deviated from Daryl and Beth versus it's certainly not Daryl and Carol. Yes, of course, they have moments together that the shippers interpret as romantic, but we know they're not. They've always just had a very, very deep friendship, and they've connected on a deep level because they're from similar backgrounds. But again, the show, you just have to look at what they set up for the show. I mean, I think we could also look at the way that they did Michonne this way. The instant Michonne showed up at the prison back in season 3, right? They had this moment where they had her and Rick locking eyes across the fence, and that was really an obvious foreshadow of them eventually getting together, even though right after that they hated each other at first, right? And were enemies kind of at the very, very beginning. So I'm just saying that to me, they've never given us any indication that Maggie and Negan will be romantic. It's always been them hating each other. Just the fact that he killed Glenn, I don't think that they would recover from that. The show, the writers, I mean, if they put her with Negan in a romantic way. And if they were going to do that, I mean, don't get me wrong, I think some shows could pull it off. If you put enough breadcrumbs and you put enough emotion in it from the beginning to get some fans behind it, I think you can pull off just about anything. I mean, for heaven's sake, these guys have pulled off a redemption for Negan at this point. So anything's possible, but they just have not given us any indication that they're going to make the relationship between Maggie and Negan turn romantic. So, I mean, sure, I could be wrong and we'll just have to wait and see where it goes, but I would be really surprised if they did that. But that said, they are putting them together, and I feel like they're going to do something interesting with them. I just don't know what it'll be. The other thing that comes to mind is that even if they're using the Neggie, I don't know if I'm saying that right, Neggie, I'm not sure how you would say that. They may be using that hashtag, but keep in mind that the powers that be have used the Carol hashtag before, as in CARYL. And when they use it, they don't mean it romantically, even though the fans a lot of time do. That is like the romance nickname for those who ship Daryl and Carol. The powers that be will use that and will say soulmates, but it's very clear right now that they don't mean it romantically. They just mean it as in kind of a fun kick-butt duo, Daryl and Carol together, in the same way that it would be like Daryl and Rick together, that sort of thing. Or they mean soulmates, but they mean it on a friend level, or they just have a really deep connection and a deep relationship, but it's not romantic, it's platonic. So even if they're using the Neggie hashtag, again, that may not necessarily mean that they're thinking romance. It may mean that they're going to become this butt-kicking duo. And I mean, what they did, I only watched Dead City once, and I really need to watch it again because I'm sure I've forgotten half of it now. And, it's not my favorite. I'm very much more interested in Daryl's storyline and everything for obvious reasons. But, I mean, by the end, Negan was kind of the king of New York, and then we had this whole thing where it seems like Maggie's going to need to go back again. And now they're saying that Herschel may end up being a villain. So they have a story that they're planning. And I do think in the same way that Carol is actually a very interesting character because she's so flawed and because she can be so toxic at times, I also think that Maggie and Negan's relationship is interesting because they hate each other so much, because he really did murder her husband, and now she's being forced to sort of team up with him. And so even though I'm not going to say that Dead City was my favorite or was like the most fascinating thing ever, I think that they could do a lot with that relationship that would be really interesting, and they don't necessarily have to go romantic with it. You are right that friends to lovers is a huge trope in the romance genre. But once again, they've just never shown us really anything even symbolic that says to me that Maggie and Negan are going to be lovers. I just don't think that's where they're going with it. So yeah, anyway, it's really interesting to kind of conjecture about. I don't know what story they have in mind for these two, but I am interested to find out. So I will keep watching later seasons of Dead City, and I do plan to rewatch the first season again. So I do think that they are doing this just to stir people up and get fans engaging. And is there another motive? I mean, it probably is a hint at something, but we just don't know exactly what yet. And like I said, I'm sure a lot of people are taking it as a romantic thing, and that's why, like you say, all the fans are freaking out in the comments. But they could be priming the fans for something. Again, I don't think it's romance, but what is it then? I don't know. They haven't been real upfront, given us very many hints about where Dead City is going, in the same way that they haven't given us really any obvious hints about where Daryl Dixon's story is going. I mean, we kind of know, but that they're not like giving us all these trailers yet or telling us what direction they're going with it. We just have to wait and see to find out. So I think this is a really interesting discussion. I'd like to hear what everybody thinks, but my personal opinion is I don't think it'll ever end up being romantic between Maggie and Negan, but I am interested to see what it will be instead. So thank you for the ask. Next one. I'm sure this has been mentioned before under the Beth Walkers category, but anytime I watch the pilot episode, I'm blown away by this. The little girl Walker Rick interacts with and ends up shooting at the camp by the gas station. She's very blonde and has a left forehead bullet wound, as does Beth. Another set of details which always jumps out is Season 6, Episode 2, during Carol's hallucination when the Kingdom's soldiers are fighting walkers. Carol hallucinates all of them, male or female, as wearing a yellow top. A female walker she even sees as wearing a yellow button-down sort of dress. Is yellow the fashion for the apocalypse that season? We all know the powers that be don't forget details. None of this is coincidence. And later in Season 6, we have Negan's wife, Amber, another Beth lookalike. Negan's wife's name was Lucille. Leah reappeared with a Beth hair color and style. Beth reminders just keep on coming. Why if she's no longer relevant to the story? Yeah, I mean, agreed. Definitely, it's not a coincidence. I agree with everything he said here. Definitely, they wouldn't keep doing it if she wasn't relevant. But the other thing I kind of want to mention here is that, so when you start with the little girl, they always called her Teddy Bear Girl. And man, I might just jump into a rabbit hole here. Okay, so let me try and stay on track here. I don't know what was planned at the beginning, but I don't think Gimple was attached until Season 2. He might have been, but I want to say he came on in Season 2. So and that makes sense because when they filmed Season 1, they didn't know if the show would get picked up, right? It was just a pilot season show where that's why they only had 6 episodes, and they didn't expect it to do so well, but man, it blew every other pilot out of the water that season. And so of course they returned, and when they returned for Season 2, they did a longer season and everybody was hired on long term and all of that, and then they would have had to hire a team of writers because when you do a pilot episode or a pilot season, it's notoriously low budget because they're not going to spend a lot of money if the show's not going to get picked up anyway, right? So it's always kind of an experiment. So I believe that Teddy Bear Girl was sort of the ultimate example of what we always say about Gimple going back, working backwards through episodes and mining details for symbolism. I think that everything that they put into Teddy Bear Girl there in the first episode may well have been random. I mean, maybe not. Maybe there was symbolism there, but they didn't know if the show was going forward, so it wouldn't have mattered that much what side of the forehead her wound was on, or whether she was carrying a rabbit or a bear or a duck. You know what I mean? Like, those things might have just been things that they put in for the scene, not really thinking ahead that much. But then I believe Gimple went back, and because she is like the first the first image we see in the show, and she is she's not the very first walker that Rick interacts with. Bicycle Girl is, but she's the first one that's like, I guess that's like a whole walker, but it's more than that. It's like when he saw the bicycle walker, he was scared and just kind of ran away. In this case, he didn't. It was the first walker he faced. It might have been the first walker he killed, although I don't quote me on that. I'm not sure that's true, but it's just a big deal. It's an iconic scene, right? So all I'm trying to say is I think that Gimple took that and took a lot of symbols that he ended up using for the biggest, most overarching themes in the show from Teddy Bear Girl. And because Beth is going to end up being the biggest, most, epitomizing, if that's a word, example of this theme of someone who dies and comes back, of a resurrection theme, of the serious theme, of all of this. I mean, I think those, we always equate them with Beth, and for good reason, but I think those themes are actually prevalent throughout the story, and they apply to a lot of characters and a lot of arcs, and they just are the overarching theme for the entire series and the entire world, the TWD universe, and the stories they're trying to tell. So, people might say that we equate too many things to Beth, and there might be some truth in that not everything might directly be tied to her, but at the same time, it kind of is, or at least it all amounts to the same thing, because any storyline or arc that has similarities to hers, it's all under the umbrella of the same theme and the same types of evidence, like the same symbols that we're seeing in the show. So the color yellow, the blonde hair, the serious symbolism with the one eye, you know, all of these things that we've seen. We've seen tea kettles, we've seen rabbits, we've seen carrots, we've seen, you know, all these things that we picked up. They're all symbols or aspects of the same thing. So when we see them around other people, we can extrapolate what happens in those arcs and apply it to Beth. So that's why we always say, okay, this is what happened in season 6 when we had Glenn's fake out. The same stuff happened around Beth. So the fact that Glenn survived also means Beth survived. Do you see what I mean? What actually happened in season 6 might not have anything to do with Beth directly, at least not in the narrative, because she wasn't a part of it. But that doesn't mean we can't glean some evidence and some hope for her return from it. I mean, I'm going really deep here, but I hope that all makes sense. All I'm saying is that Teddy Bear Girl, the reason she looks so much like Beth and has so many Beth symbols around her is that she was like the original example of the symbolism that Gimple then latched onto and used all of the details around her moving forward to always do the symbolism. And again, Beth is going to be the epitome of that arc and of that theme and what he's trying to say. So of course, all of that same symbolism is used around her. The same thing with Carol. Absolutely. I mean, I think there's a lot of symbolism there because Hilltop was a big deal, because Carol, a big part of it is that Carol was about to meet her soulmate. And that's something that, I don't know that everybody picked up on at the time, because she goes to the kingdom. And I mean, unless people kind of knew in advance or had spoilers in advance, I don't know that anyone realized right away that she would be paired with Ezekiel, especially because in the comic books, he's with Michonne. So it's just a way, kind of a twist in a way that they are changing things up in the show, which I loved. I mean, I always loved their relationship, and I still do. But the point is, she's seeing all this yellow. She's hallucinating something that maybe, you know, happened during the missing 17 days that we haven't seen yet. And this is right before she meets the man that is her soulmate and her romantic other half, you know. So there's definitely reason for that. And I definitely think that we can apply it to Beth. But at the same time, it's also just more of the same theme, which Beth is a part of. So I know I'm kind of going in circles here, but it just goes to show that it all amounts to the same thing. You know, it's all related. I 100% agree that it is not a coincidence. And I think the fact that we have Beth lookalikes in other characters, it's the same thing. You could argue that, I don't know, I don't think you can get away with arguing that Daryl isn't seeing some Beth in Leah. Like that, I think you could. But, you know, Daryl never knew Lucille. Nobody else did except Negan, because she died before he met any of them. But that doesn't mean that the same theme isn't going on. So yeah. Anyway, okay. I'll stop rambling now. I hope that made at least some sense. But yeah, I totally agree. It all works together, and it all kind of is really, really hopeful and good for us. So, all right, I'm going to cut it off there, and I will be back pretty soon. Have a great week, guys.